And it reached a point where I realized that I needed to get physically active, but it was a real battle. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to share a little bit about my clinical experience and my own personal battle for physical fitness. And I hope to present the blueprints on how to become and stay physically active at work. All right, I used to be a big proponent before COVID for playing different sports. Here's a league that we have at Loma called Goal for Health, which is great for involving the Latino community with daughters and mothers. And you can see how happy they are. But now that's kind of changed. We have to be careful. But it never ceases to amaze me when I have patients who tell me, I will start working out, Dr. Bastian, once the gyms start to open. And I say to myself, well, what would have happened if we go back to, say, the 1500s when COVID-13 was around and that disrupted the gym? And, you know, so back then, there was no gym, and people would get their physical activity in their normal work day, their chores. And so that's what we have to reclaim for ourselves is during our work day, how do we make it more physically active and enjoyable? So these are the learning objectives that we're going to look at: defining physical activity and sedentarism, the problem of sedentarism, the benefits of physical activity, the case for microbursts of physical activity at work, the barriers to physical activity, and how to integrate it at work. Let's take a look at that first one, physical activity and sedentarism. Sedentary behavior is basically not much movement. It's characterized by an energy expenditure of equal to or less than 1.5 METs while in a sitting, reclining, or lying posture. So that's a real technical definition. In other words, this, right? We spend a good amount of our time, around 15 hours, sitting, either eating or traveling to work or at work. And then for the rest of our day, when we're not sedentary at work or doing light activity, we're sleeping. And we need the sleep, but we need to break into those two big pies of the light activity and the sedentarism. Now, the average American gets about 12 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity a day. That's that. Not too much, right? So let's move that to the recommended 30 minutes a day and see what a great impact that has. Beautiful. So as you can see, even if we're getting the ideal amount of exercise, it's really not taking much out of that pie, and we really have to address that huge, vast, sedentary part of the circle here. So let's look at the problems of sedentarism. Why is it so bad? We're becoming more and more sedentary, whether it be sitting or standing for too long. Even our kids, unfortunately, are doing a lot of that too. Now, that doesn't look too healthy for those kids. Let's get them a good chair back. There we go. So you can see sedentarism has almost the same relative risk for mortality as smoking. A lot of people are shocked by that. So what's your risk? If you look at this chart here, for the amount of hours spent sitting, you can calculate your relative risk for mortality and for negative health effects. The more hours you're spending sitting, the greater your relative risk is for serious health effects. If you like maps, this one shows the southern United States in the dark blue. This is representative of those who spend most of their time, their leisure activities, sitting. And then if you turn to this next one, the dark red, the same area represents the majority of people who, in the dark red, with the highest risk for stroke, heart attack, and mortality. So there's a real correlation between spent time sedentary and these chronic diseases. Basically, it's the #1 cause, and this is low cardiorespiratory fitness. That's what the CRF stands for. It's the #1 attributable action to mortality in the country, more so than high blood pressure, diabetes, and cholesterol. It all has to do with the blood vessels. Yes, these blood vessels. They are everywhere, and they surround all of our organs. I like the analogy of a hose. We want our blood vessels to be new, supple hoses, not the type of hose that you leave on your lawn over the summer and it becomes kinked up, starts to spring a leak. And that's what can happen over being inactive over a long period of time. And that leak is the stroke or the heart attack or the other different chronic diseases. And here's a list of those. Pretty much you name it, and sedentarism is a direct cause for those problems. Now, some people say, well, yeah, I work out. Going back to that pie chart, I work out 30 minutes a day, but I spend 8 hours a day sitting at a desk. So if you look here at the most active people, but the most hours a day sitting at a desk. So if you look here at the most active people, but the most TV, their risk of mortality is the same as those with the least activity, but the least TV. So amazing how powerful it is to be physically active during that vast amount of time that we're usually sedentary. If you don't use this screen or this one, you're probably using this one. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to avoid that. The moral of the story are those slippers were made for walking. And if you have a dog, take him with you. This is my dog, Bruno, and he loves to go out for a walk. So let's take a look at the benefits of physical activity. Basically, it reverses or decreases the severity of all of those diseases that you saw in the previous slide. When you take them all together, you decrease death from all causes by about 22 to 35%. That's impressive. If exercise could be packed in a pill, it would be the single most widely prescribed and beneficial medicine in the nation. This is from Robert N. Butler, the founder of the National Institute of Aging. Here in this elegant study, if you look at the sit category, they compare uninterrupted sitting throughout the entire workday versus 30 minutes of exercise in green at the beginning of the workday versus the micro, which is interrupting the same amount of time here, but broken up into micro bursts of energy and exercise throughout the day. And it's actually the micro group that has the most energy, the least appetite, and the best cognitive testing throughout the day. Here in the Evergreen Project shows that in blue, that's remain active. So those who remain active throughout their life have the best survival. But if in the green, convert to active, you can start at any time in your life and convert and become more active, and your survival curve starts to go out horizontal to those who are always active. In fact, there's no statistical difference between the remain active and the convert to being active in terms of survival. So the moral of that story is you can start at any time in your life. And here's all the things that can be improved with physical activity bouts less than 10 minutes. Your cholesterol, your blood sugar, your weight. And why don't we pause there before we get into the case for microbursts of physical activity at work. I think your volume might be off.
Thank you. So thank you for that. And I think all of us can really relate to the comedian that you kind of showed us about how motivation is a factor, isn't it, with exercise? Yeah. Motivation and time. So, I think we all live in the real world. We have motivation and time issues. What would you tell someone who is saying, I know I have to do this, but I'm just not motivated to do it? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I would look into what is causing them to be unmotivated. Is it a black or white thinking, whereas I got to go all in an hour every day, hitting the gym, or I can't do it without the gym or my home gym? And is it a lack of knowledge that actually by doing these bursts of activity that they'll be more productive at work, they'll have more energy, better mood, more likely to collaborate with team members, and less bushed at the end of the workday. So and I'm going to show that in the second half of this PowerPoint, how that happens, the mechanism behind that.
Now, I love what you kind of mentioned about how you don't necessarily have to be a marathon runner all your life.
Exactly.
that you can start. So what would be your advice to people, like, how do I get started? What's the first thing I can probably do to get started so I have that trajectory down like
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned?
If once at work you've completed a task or seen a patient or a client, and you've got 30 seconds between that and the next thing you have to do, or you can create that 30-second space, you just need to stand up, and instead of just stretching, which is good, and I see a lot of people doing that, but actually doing some type of physical activity, whether those be knee lifts or squats or walking to the water cooler, whatever it is. And it really can be as little as 30 seconds. And the detail, the importance of it is to do it frequently. That's what those microbursts do. And they're actually additive. As you go through each successive microburst throughout the day, you gain more benefits than you did with the first.
Okay. So, interestingly, about what you said, I didn't hear you say you have to be out of breath, you have to be sweaty, you have to be miserable. When a lot of
Yeah.
people think about exercise and exercise bouts to be beneficial,
Yeah.
you didn't say any of that.
No, and that's because you don't need to. And frankly, that would be silly. At work, we can't be sweating, we can't be out of breath. We want to do this to be energized, to actually gain more stamina. And so you can do moderate activity, and the fact that it's such a short microburst, you're not going to be sweating. You might maybe feel like your temperature went up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You might feel a little bit red, but you're not going to need to apply a second dosing of your deodorant.
Right. So now I just want to remind our viewers that if you're watching us live, you can ask Dr. Bastian questions now. So type it into the comment section and we will be able to ask our questions live. Another question about exercise before we get to the second half of your presentation is that you're talking about doing this at work, and you might be going through this in the next half, is that when you do sometimes exercise, you don't want to be looked at as quote unquote the weirdo in the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people might be self-conscious about that. How what would you say to a person that's worried about being kind of the oddball in the
Right.
office?
Well, I think one thing you can do is if you have a part of the office or you have your own office, you can quickly close the door and you can do that. If you're sharing an office or a space, you might want to just let your coworker know, hey, I'm looking to be more healthy, and I went to this talk, and believe it or not, they say that we really need to be active throughout the day, and I'm hoping to be a better colleague, a better worker as a result of this. So that's why I'm doing this. And you're welcome to join me, and you're also welcome to have a good laugh. And when I started doing it, people would laugh and make fun of me, and then as more and more coworkers and colleagues were joining me at the breaks, we started to change the tide.
Well, wonderful. I think that's great advice. And I think the likelihood that your office mate knows that they should be moving more too is high. So, you can definitely motivate each other and maybe make them feel guilty when you get up and do your exercise, and they'll jump on the bandwagon eventually.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, again, I want to remind our viewers that we can absolutely ask Dr. Bastian questions while we have him here if you're watching us live, and I guess we'll get to the second half.
All right, let's do. All right, so let me share my screen. And let's share. And current slide. And you guys can see that? Excellent. Does that look clear to everybody?
Yes.
All right, so objective 4, the case for these microbursts of physical activity of work. Why are they so powerful? Let's get into the details. For one, if you look at the Motorola study, they did this, and they showed that by creating time for wellness, physical activity, the workers had more resources to serve others. For every dollar they invested in this type of wellness, they created a savings of almost $4. Now, in California, which is a great place to work, we get 10 minutes for every 4 hours we work, 10 minutes break. So if you're just using those 10 minutes for every 4 hours, you don't have to take any time out of work, so you don't have to invest that initial dollar. So for those workplaces, it goes from $4 to almost $5 benefit. Plus, you see up to a 15% savings in annual healthcare costs, which is really important if the healthcare is being offered by your employer. Absentee costs, again, same situation, falling by on average $4 per worker per period of time. Increasing our collective brain power. The magic behind this is it increases these microbursts, increase the brain-derived neurotropic factor. And that's sort of what allows us to have this neural synaptic plasticity and to have neurogenesis in the hippocampal area. Now, the hippocampus is important for developing new memories and retaining them. So that's important when you're learning new protocols at work, or you're having to take on a new computer system like we've done recently at Loma. And then mitochondrial genesis, that's the power factory of the neuron. So as you get more and more mitochondria by doing these microbursts, the endurance of your neurons is going up. So you're able to do more of that intense, sophisticated or complex thinking for longer periods of time with less fatigue. Now, this study is very elegant. Often we get fatigued, right, because we're looking at the screen. If you look up here in the top, this is a person who is not doing any physical activity during the day. And on the bottom, there is the microburst. And if you look here, there's a light that shows up in the back of the brain called the occipital lobe. And that is responsible for vision. And so if we're getting primarily fatigued because we're looking at things all the time, then these microbursts are going to activate and make stronger this area so that we can tolerate looking at the screen longer. So decreased fatigue by 65%, increases in alertness, and more importantly, when you go home, you're not going to feel as bushed or sluggish. So that's a quality of life for you when you finish work. Mood. Excellent, mitigates consequences of acute stress that you might get from another coworker or from a client or patient. It's been shown to reduce anger, depression, and anxiety. So those are one of the biggest things that create the absenteeism, or what we call presenteeism, when you're at work but not as productive because you're struggling. So this helps decrease that struggle. And then less media time on the phones. I know we all enjoy it, but at the same time, it can be exhausting, right? And in terms of an employer's point of view, if you have a less desire to be on the phone and more time to be working because you're feeling more positive, more motivated, that's a win-win situation for everybody. So here's just looking at motivation and mood. And then here's one on social interaction and rumination. Social interaction goes up, so that's great. If you have a question, you're more likely to go to your team and ask for help and not stay by yourself. Rumination, you're less likely to focus on the fact that your boss just insulted you or said that you're not doing a good job, or your coworker woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You're going to be less likely to focus on those things when you're doing these microbursts throughout the day. So what are the barriers then, if this is so great? And I think a lot of you can say, yeah, there's plenty of barriers. So let's take those one by one. So this gets back to the theme, exercising on empty. We talked about the empty gym, and basically it'd be a waste of your time to try to do these microbursts by going to the gym, changing, just to do a few seconds. So it's not meant to be at the gym. This is exercise at work. Empty routine. Often people say, I got to do this all or nothing. I got to have this great list of exercises. I got to rotate muscle groups. None of that's needed. You're doing moderate microbursts of exercise, so it can be the same thing all the time. We talked about mental health. With just a little investment of 30 seconds, you can turn that anxiety, that depression around by doing these microbursts. Empty awareness, people just not even aware that this is possible, but it is. Empty age, people thinking I'm too old to do this, but again, we're doing something that's moderate and for very short periods of time. As you'll see in the next slide, no matter what your medical conditions might be, there's very few that will prevent you from doing these microbursts. Empty climate, I'm sure you can figure what that is. In Southern California, we say it's too hot or too cold in other parts of the country. But that's the great thing about the problem, is that it happens in a temperature controlled environment, work. So we don't have to go outside. We can do this right at our desks. Empty energy. Again, when you exercise and you're doing this microburst, you're turning stored fuel into active energy. And just by definition, that active energy is something that's going to be kinetic. It's going to give you movement. It's going to give you momentum. So it's going to create energy and not take it away. It's not like if you work out for a half an hour or an hour, you feel exhausted. That's the key to these microbursts. They're going to empower you. So I want you to meet a patient of mine. His name is Ed Zosted. He's a 54-year-old male truck driver in the clinic for a diabetes follow-up. He drinks 6 cups of coffee a day, and you can see his different things here, his medical history, his medications. And he tells you, I'm too tired and stressed out to work out. I can't afford to work out. So let's look at some of the reasons that you might hear from one of your colleagues or from one of your patients. One thing I hear is, what if I have a heart condition or CHF? And the answer to that is, again, even if you have a heart condition, this type of exercise is probably going to be cardio rehabilitative. So it's actually going to be good if you have problems with your heart. If you're really out of shape, this is the best way to start with the least possibility of being injured. What if I retire in a year and plan to be active then? Great, start now so you don't injure yourself when you try to go all full in when you retire. What if my boss or my coworker don't support work exercise? Tell them about this talk and just let them know why you're doing it. And you don't have to convert anybody. It'll happen anyways. What if I sweat too much? Again, I am often with a shirt and tie and a white coat on. I'm doing my squats. I'm only doing it for 30 seconds. I'm not sweating too much, and I tend to be prone to sweating. What if I just ate? Great. This will help you not only digest your food, it moves things along in the intestines, but it's going to decrease those glucose spikes that do damage after we've eaten. If I'm tired or you have a deadline, again, this is probably going to give you more energy, more focus, more motivation. What if I have a mask on? We're in COVID, right? You know, a valid question. If you have an office to yourself, you can go into your office and do that. But again, it's not going to be really vigorous activity. You might huff and puff a little bit more, but you should be able to do it. What if I have chronic joint pain? You work those joints that are not in pain, and the endorphins will go to those joints that hurt and help those as well. And all the benefits that you get in your brain will still be there. Putting coworkers at risk for COVID, just not proven. If I injure myself, is that workman's comp? It's more like a joke. And if I'm rushing around, this will allow you to work smarter, not harder at work. And you really don't need a Nike jumpsuit on to be doing this. I've seen colleagues do it with a 3-piece suit. So when not to work out? You know, if you're really sleep deprived and you're really stressed out and you're just hanging on, you know, don't force it. Listen to your body is the biggest thing. But if you do have a common cold and no fever, a little bit of exercise can actually help clear the nasal passages, help relieve that nasal congestion. But if you have fever, fatigue, or widespread muscle aches, that's not the day to do it. That brings us to our last learning objective. How do we do this at work? How do we integrate this? Well, ironically, smokers, we can learn a lot from them. They have to go outside to smoke in a special area, hide and be ashamed. All we have to do is stretch from our perch in front of the computer and either take a walk for 30 seconds or do some squats. You can choose either the 1-minute intervals, and that's every 30 minutes. Again, this is with the free time you get in California. And I don't know if it's that way in all the other states, but I assume there's some provision for that. Every 30 minutes in between clients or patients or tasks. If you prefer to do something a little bit easier to start off, 30-second intervals. Same thing, But now you have 2 5-minute intervals where you can walk before your lunch to increase your metabolism and walk after lunch to help with digestion and to dampen those glucose spikes. So let's turn this into this, right? This happens to be there in the center bottom, the president of Loma Linda, Dr. Richard Hart. And as you can see there, he's doing some podium incline push-ups, even as he's talking, mind you. So pretty impressive. Now there is office equipment. There's the sitting desks, the standing treadmill desks. This is a bike desk. I love this. You're right. This is a better way than a standing desk. And then there's low-tech solutions, and these are the ones I really advocate. There may be a desk-size at your human resources where you can quickly turn on a link on your computer, and they'll take you through a 30 or 1-minute exercise while you're seated. Do squats with the staff or yourself. Take the stairs. 2 to 8 minutes walk after lunch. And I say 2 to 8 minutes. They're like, why 2 to 8 minutes? That's because I don't want you to lock into 5 to 10 minutes. This is not black or white. Whatever time you have, you take it. And then there's the classic parking further away from the entrance. Here's an interesting thing. I've been to a lot of conferences, and this is the in thing now when you're at a conference, that in between talks, you get up and you do some exercise. So if it's good enough for these expensive conferences, why don't we do it at work? And I think we're running short on time, but in the future, I was going to show you some exercises you can do. This was called Gone in 60 Seconds, but all you do is you stand up, you might do some squats, you might do some, you could even do rows. And all you do is you're strengthening, you're pulling as if you really were rowing something, and you actually get exercise out of that. The same thing, you could be doing your military presses, as long as you're pushing the force into it. So you don't need any equipment. And as you can see there, I didn't stand up. All right, so how do you make it happen? Plan in advance, right? Not. Just do it. Have a plan B, forget about plans. Recruit an exercise partner. I mean, that's great if you have one, but only have somebody who wants to be a champion for it. Built-in accountability. Accountability might be good, as long as it doesn't put you into black or white thinking that I was supposed to do 3 episodes of 30 seconds and I only did 2 today. That's totally fine. You just work with what you have, and as you grow, you take these steps, you'll integrate this more and more because you're going to feel better more and more. And that's going to be the natural cue to do it more and more. So, exhausted has turned into exhilarated. I can do 30 seconds of calf raises and glute squeezes every half hour while trucking. I'll leave you with this. Our bodies are designed to move. Many times we think we don't have the time to engage in physical activity. But in reality, we don't have time to not exercise. Our bodies need movement like we need air, water, and food. Think about this. Even when you're extremely busy, you still make time to brush your teeth and put on your clothes. These things are non-negotiable. Moving at work is non-negotiable. So let's start treating it that way. The choice is in your hands and in your feet. And here's just a quick video of some exercise that we've done at our work.
There we go.
Hey guys, does anybody want to do some squats with the resistance bands?
Yeah. Are you going to join us?
Serge, you want to do some squats with resistance bands?
Yeah. Get moving. Get some blood pumping. All right.
You want to start off with squats and then we'll do our deadlifts?
Yeah.
So here we're using the bands so that our squats are actually more productive, more muscle building in a shorter amount of time. And those bands you can keep at your desk in your pocket. We'll skip to another video. This is after I had been doing this for a while. You can see there's a real change in my physique.
John Dukel, thank you for precepting me on this rotation. It's been awesome so far. So this patient, if you look at the vitals, the QT is actually prolonged, which makes me wonder about the heart rate. Oh, I'm sorry. in just 1 second. I actually, every hour that alarm goes off and I do my exercises in place. So this is just gonna take 90 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now, I don't want you to interrupt when you're talking with a colleague. So this is this is really hopefully
5,
for a little comic
1,
relief.
2. People think I'm crazy, but 5. And then I do my calves. 1, 2, 3.
This is just to show you how easy
4,
it is.
5, and then I actually have these bands, which are pretty cool. Check this out. I do biceps 1, 2, 3, 4.
And again, you can do those without
5,
the bands. All you're
and I
doing
work
is
on
you're
my back.
flexing
1,
as
2,
if you had them.
3, 4, 5. And I go out and just work on my triceps. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So, any questions? I'll be happy to take them. Again, my name is Peter Bastian, and I specialize in preventive medicine. And if you're looking to schedule a one-on-one meeting with a preventive medicine physician, you can contact us at this information here below. And I think I'll leave it on that screen while we're doing the questions, or let me stop sharing here.
Well, thank you. We have some questions coming through, and I loved your videos. Clearly, you're showing your commitment to doing exercise. So let's get to some of these questions that have come through. Is there a specific exercise that is optimal for longevity?
Yes, that specific exercise is any exercise that you have time to fit into 30-second or 60-second intervals during the day. The more frequent you do whatever you enjoy doing at a moderate rate, which if we go back to that METs, it's about 6 to 9 METs, closer to the 6, which is walking or the squats or doing some of those exercises that you saw in the video. That's all you need to do.
We have enough. Oh, you mentioned METs. Why don't you explain to our viewers what a MET is if they've never heard that term before?
Yeah. So the MET is, I mean, to put it in sort of a common layman's terms, is the amount of oxygen you need to burn a certain amount of energy. And so as you're using more energy and becoming more physically active, you need more oxygen to make that work. And that's where the METs come from.
Okay, great. We actually have a really great question here. How can I help my child be more physically active?
Excellent. Be more physically active with them, for starters, and they will see by your example.
Great. And then what is one exercise that is easiest for beginners?
Yeah. One of the easiest exercises is just while you're sitting, you can do the military presses. Another one is, and if your knees are okay, you can do the squats. And sometimes I'll do some uppercuts as I'm coming up so that I work the abdominals as I'm coming up. If your knees are not good, you can do the calf raises and move your arms while you're doing the calf raises, or just go for a walk.
Great. Sorry, my phone is going off in my house office here, my office studio. But
By all means, take that break and walk to that phone if you need to.
Sure. I have another one of our last questions here is, what is your favorite type of physical activity and why?
Well, I'm very passionate about weight loss. I specialize in obesity medicine. And so I like to do squats. 40% of our muscle mass is below the waist. And so those are, your legs are two very powerful engines for burning fuel, so that instead of storing it in the tank around our liver, our internal organs, you're more likely to burn it off. And it also, I think, gives me a lot more energy because I'm working 40% of my muscle mass versus each arm is about 9%. So I like the squats. Those are my favorite.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for your time here today. I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us. We are very excited that you have come. As some of our regular viewers know, we usually try to do Wellness Live every last Wednesday of the month. However, during the holiday months, November and December, we have a different date. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be having Wellness Live on November 11th. So same thing, Pacific Standard Time at 5:30 p.m. On November 11th. And we're going to be having Dr. Carl Hafner talking about the holidays and health. So we want to invite you to join us. And again, I would like to thank our guest speaker today, who is Dr. Peter Bastian. And my name is Dr. Olivia Moses, and I'm your